The exercise we've been doing with Justin is to try to work on his story continuity. Right, so he's got a pretty good story in his head, very funny, good characters. Now we're trying to make sure the story comes across to the reader. So he has the story in his head, pretty much. We're going to see it in just a second. Now we have to take that story and turn it into written chapters. And the hardest part is going to be deciding what goes into each chapter and what goes into the next chapter to make sure that what happens in each chapter ties into what happened in the chapter before, and also the thrust of it continues in the chapter that follows. That's what continuity is. Okay, so we're going to do the MCS first, and then I asked Justin to do the continuity sheet so that we can look at it chapter by chapter and make sure that each chapter is doing its job, satisfying the reader and yet maintaining momentum. So Ariel and I will help you with that after we hear the MCS. Thoughts, questions? You ready to go?
Sounds good.
All right. Whenever you're ready, start your MCS, please.
Okay. Once upon a time, in a fantasy town inhabited by both humans and elves, the town's former shoemaker, Felix Cobb, prepares for his foundational town hall meeting as Brookhaven's newest and first human mayor. But worried that he won't be allowed to hold the position without making a splash of sorts, Felix plans to pitch the town on a grand festival, only to show up to his first town meeting to find that no one is there. Brookhaven's Council of Elders tell Felix if he can't get butts and seats, he'll lose his position, and the only way to get butts and seats is to get an endorsement from the previous mayor, Festa Trumbull. So Felix turns to his best friend and local mount rancher Holloway Maine, who lends him out a ram to get him up the mountain where Festa lives. After a long journey, Felix finds Festa and pleads for her endorsement, but she's very scornful about her time as mayor and refuses. But not willing to give up just yet, Felix pushes further, and appreciative of his stubbornness, Festa agrees. But surprising even himself, Felix refuses the endorsement, deciding that any legacy that he wants to build can't be built off of someone else's. He's excited to share his newfound confidence, so Felix tries to call home using a magical calling device, but in doing so is told that the elders plan to depose him while he's away from town. So he rushes home as fast as he can, takes off down the mountain on his ram, but in the process crashes, forcing him to decide one last time if the life that he wants to live is worth fighting for, or if he should just go back to the life that he was living. Figuring out that not much time has passed since they got in their accident, Felix picks up his rushed trip back to town hall and gives the town hall elders a piece of his mind. Now, with the full attention of the town, Felix proudly announces his town festival and wins Brookhaven's favor all on his own, awarding his victory with a well-deserved nap.
Good. Excellent. You get fireworks.
Practice that a lot in the shower.
Well, no, you can tell, right? It's way, way more fluent. Look back at previous tellings, and you can see this is just an order of magnitude, an entire level up in fluency. Excellent work. So, thoughts, Ariel, first off?
I have 0 questions. That was so good.
Yeah.
So good.
0 questions. I could recreate the story in Ariel too in our heads. So let's take a little version of the retelling test. It's going to be a little tougher. But Ariel, where do you think the story peaked?
That's a good question. I mean, there were like a few really important decisions at the end. I feel like the most energy I felt was when he made it to the town hall meeting and he gave his final speech. That's why I feel like a lot of the energy in the storytelling went.
Good, exactly. So this is a reflection of Ariel's perception. And she's not perceiving the words as much as she's perceiving the energy. Exactly what we want to have happen, right? She's not only listening to the story as it's told, she's taking it all in, including all of Justin's sort of called nonverbal cues, right? The enthusiasm, the pace, etc. So now let's turn to Justin. Justin, is that the peak of the story?
Yeah, his arrival at town hall and subsequent giving it to them is the peak of the story.
Perfect. So you'll remember, 4 weeks ago, we were having some trouble deciding what was the peak. His self-discovery about whether he needed Festa Trumbull or whether he could create his legacy on his own, as opposed to him showing off the elders in the town council, showing up the elders in the town council and sort of preventing their coup. We've decided, you decided, I should say, and your MCS reflects that. Couldn't make me happier, right? So now we have a good MCS. It has a clear peak. We want to go through the third or fourth, I believe, iteration of the continuity sheet and make sure that each chapter is delivering, right? Is satisfying, has the right amount of story, it's aligned with the story, and then it has continuity. So Ariel and I are going to help you with this. And the way we're going to do it is I'm going to share this so everyone can see it. Make it a bit smaller. What do you know? There's a minimum size in Microsoft Excel. All right. So I guess I have to do it this way. So we're just going to take turns. Ariel's going to read it. I'll read the next one. And then after each chapter, we're going to ask ourselves this question. Align with the story, sufficient amount of story, and then continuity with what came before and what comes after. Check. And Justin, you're just going to take notes. Remember, these are never tests of the reader, right? These are always tools to help the author craft an effective story. All of this falls in the transmission category, right? Justin's story is there and it's well enough developed. So now we're working on transmission. He may have to come back to development later, but for now, not a concern. We're only concerned with transmission, effectively telling the story in words. All right. So whenever you're ready, Ariel, why don't you read the first plot sentence?
Cool. Sounds good. In a fantasy town inhabited by both humans and elves, the town's former shoemaker, Felix Cobb, prepares for his foundational town hall meeting as Rookhaven's newest and first human mayor. Worried that he won't be allowed to hold the position without making a splash, Felix plans to pitch the town on a grand festival, only to find upon arrival that nearly no one has shown up.
Good. So thoughts, Ariel?
Yeah, I think that follows the MCS for sure. I don't have any
So what's
questions.
the inciting incident? What's the choice that Felix Cobb makes in the first chapter that launches the story?
His decision to pitch a grand festival.
Justin, is she right?
Yeah, this is something we talked about last time, and I'd say that's pretty much, yeah. Because we talked about last time about maybe the inciting incident happening before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how to like put that into words with this particular chapter. You know what I mean?
So the good news is, from this description, this portion of your story, Ariel confidently identified an inciting incident. So I want you to go back to the first chapter and make sure that it's the inciting incident. So what we're asking for, what the reader is demanding, is that he has options. He can either propose a festival or do something else. He has to think through those options and make a choice. And then that choice has to have stakes and some immediate consequence. I haven't read your first chapter in a while, but because we've identified that as the inciting incident, those things also have to be there to provide a foundation and a pedestal for that inciting incident. Check. Good. So, good first chapter, right? If it can do all this and it's 3,000 or so words, you're done. So, do you want to read number 2 or should I, Ariel?
Go for it, Adam.
All right. With the town meeting ending in a flop and no festival being pitched, Felix confers with Brookhaven's Council of Elders, who tell him that the only chance he has at saving his position is by garnering an endorsement from the town's previous mayor, Vesta Trumbull. All right. Thoughts? Ariel, what do you think of this chapter?
Yeah, again, like really, I mean, the plot point follows really smoothly. And it's the choice of like, yeah, you have to go find, like, this is what the consequence is from it flopping.
Good. Good continuity with the previous chapter. And, now he has to go find Vesta Trumbull. The only thing that's missing is something I heard in your MCS, which is the Council of Elders are jerks. We don't know how big of jerks they are, but we do know that this is some kind of wild goose chase, right? They are attempting to sabotage Felix. Do you want to put that here or not? Maybe you do, right? So think about how you can set them up as an opposition as opposed to just being more or less benign, right? The way this reads, for example, they could be wise elders. Oh, well, yeah, you're in trouble, Felix. You should do this. But they're not, right? We know from the MCS they're jerks, so they're not wise elders, even though they may pretend to be. So you have to introduce that in there to make the story more coherent later on. Thoughts, Justin, so far?
My intention with it is to make them come off as, the helpful elders at first, so that it's more of a twist later. So I'm hoping that it reads like that. So if that is the way that it's reading, that's at least my intention for now.
Good. So to assess that, we want to look back so we want to find someone to read the whole novel and see whether they saw that. It's kind of a twist, right? To see whether they saw that twist coming, that the elders were trying to sabotage Felix all along. But you've thought about it. Great. Number 3, Ariel.
Okay. Felix decides to pursue Vesta Trumbull's endorsement. After finding out that she lives atop a local mountain, Felix must convince his best friend and local mountain rancher, Holloway, Maine, to help him with the journey.
Good. Thoughts on this?
I guess my only thought is like, what role is Holloway Maine like playing in the whole story? Does he just show up like a couple of times, or is it more than that? Yeah, like his significance with
Absolutely. It's a little thin. So what's Holloway Maine going to do for him? Why isn't Holloway Maine helping him why does he need convincing? 2 questions that you can answer in that sentence. So let me put it this way. We know he's on his way to see Vesta Trumbull. Why is Holloway Maine in the story? You need to make that clear in this sentence because it's so important to the continuity, right? All right. Number 4. After obtaining a ram named Hella from Holloway, right? So there's part of the answer to chapter 3. Felix trip up the mountain ends in both a failure to find Vesta and a failure in being able to call home about it. Prompted by Felix's pitiful pilgrimage and tragic use of magic, Vesta Trumbull reveals herself and invites the former shoemaker in for tea. Okay, thoughts, Ariel?
Yeah, I mean, great continuing, and I definitely feel like I can feel like the rise and fall of like the chapter.
Yeah, this chapter is a lot stronger because
Mhm.
we see the peak of it. It's kind of a mini peak. One thing you might consider is moving after obtaining a ram named Helra from Holloway, right? That could be the peak of chapter 3, and therefore it's not necessary for this one. Right? And then the peak is Festa Trumble's reveal. Yes? Okay, good. All right, so now he's in Festa Trumble's house. Over a few boozy cups of tea, Felix admits to Festa that his wants, little grammar problem. Felix
bad.
admits to Festa that his wants to be remembered and needs her endorsement to accomplish that. But the former mayor's scorn for Brookhaven's needy residents lead her to give Felix a no, leaving Felix with no other option but to sleep with his rejection. So what's the main action of this chapter, Ariel? And what do you think the peak is?
I feel like the main action is like Felix trying to get Festa's help, and then the peak is Festa saying no.
Good. So it's all about, this is a dialogue chapter.
Mhm.
Now what we're missing in this analysis is there's 2 more columns in the continuity and value delivery spreadsheet, namely character, right? Who Felix is and the reader's accretion, right? The reader's increase in familiarity, what they're learning about him to get to know him. Felix's arc, that's in column 2. And then column 3 is the bonus, which in this case is all the funny stuff that's happening. So this is sterile, right? Because we don't see the character development in this column, column B, and we don't see the bonus, which is in column D. So just to prove that, I will move it over and show you. So there's more stuff going on in the story than what we're reading. Right now, we're just checking for those peaks, story sufficiency per chapter, and continuity. And I think the continuity is working here, right? So good. All right, whose turn is it for number 6? Mine?
I think it might be mine.
Okay,
Maybe.
go, Mary.
That night, Felix's dreams of his festival and his future prompt him to try convincing Festa once more in the morning. Impressed by his stubbornness, Festa offers her endorsement, but is surprisingly rejected by Felix, who realizes that his own legacy can't be built off the back of someone else's.
Good. Thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it's a very strong one. It goes straight from the continuity is really good. And again, it has like the peak in it, and we see like Felix's development, his arc.
Probably the best one so far. Very clear statement of what the chapter is about, clear peak, good continuity, and sufficient, right? You can tell by reading this sentence or 2 that this is going to make a good chapter, especially in light of the other stuff going on in the project. All right, my turn. Looking to celebrate his self-growth, Felix figures out how to use the magic calling device and phone home, shades of ET, but is shocked to find out the Council of Elders plan to depose him while he's away from town. Panicked, Felix hurriedly preps his ram and heads down the mountain, but the ram's own stubbornness leads to a crash and his subsequent blacking out. So it's a little bit convoluted. Thoughts, Ariel?
This is so nitpicky. I feel like when it says like the magic calling device, I feel like I should have already known about it. Like it's like, oh yeah, of course that. Feels like it's really important. Yeah.
Definitely, right? So I can't remember this, but we can look back. I believe the magical calling device is in chapter 4, right? So we need to make that a clear part of chapter 4. If it's playing that big role in the story, and I think it's in 3 or 4 scenes if I remember correctly, then it has to have more emphasis in these little chapters. So what's the peak of this chapter? It's a good chapter in terms of its So what you've done well, Justin, so far is you've got the right amount of story in each chapter, which is a huge step forward. So now I would just sort of think through these sentences a little bit more and try to make this one a little bit tighter. So this one, chapter 6, this is perfect, right? So all of them should be about this length, about this coherent. To me, and you know, I could be wrong, but I'm just perceiving it, this one's a little bit too complicated. All right, Ariel, you want to do number 8?
Felix wakes up at a literal fork in the road where he must decide once and for all if he will continue to fight for this new life or return to his old life without facing confrontation.
Good. Thoughts on this one?
I wonder if just like a sentence just letting us know what he did decide, just to like round it out.
Perfect. Absolutely. So you can just look visually, right? This is a lot shorter than the one in chapter 6 and 7 for that matter. What did he decide? Right? Obviously, you need that for continuity with chapter 9. But I think you just left it out. In chapter 9, I will do this one. Felix makes it back to town hall before he's voted out of office and gives the elders a piece of his mind. Now, holding the town's full attention, Felix tries his hand at magic and uses it to announce his plans for a town festival and rewards his own victory with a well-deserved nap. Good. Thoughts, Ariel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, like, the peak and everything. I think what stood out to me was the magic part, because I'm not sure if that's really mentioned prior.
Exactly. I think the foam was magic. Pretty sure it's magic.
Oh,
but
yeah.
This is a new element, right? We don't know that being able to use magic is part of Felix's arc. We may know that from column B, but it's not clear from the plot so far that is a critical part of the story. So introducing it here could be problematic. Now, I think it's in your head properly, but we want to get it on the page, in this case in the spreadsheet, so that we can see how that particular aspect, his magic use, went from sort of failure to partial success to success over the course of the story, or not, right? The question is that use of magic so important that it needs to be here in this minimized continuity form? So thoughts, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I remember last time when we met, the goal was to shorten them all. So my goal was to make it as slim as possible. I think now I know which ones are too slim and I can add back onto that, which is great. And yeah, I think the other thing that we talked about was his struggle with magic and how that kind of was identified throughout the story. So I just got to figure out a way to, which it is definitely in the story, but I think that now I just have to figure out a way to make it much throughout this sheet.
Good. And you're going to have to decide how much emphasis to place on magic. Now, the way I was perceiving it, it was kind of a joke, right? He couldn't work his magical phone. But given what you said about chapter 9, now it's taking on more importance story-wise. So then that's a weighing problem, right? It's a problem of emphasis. But overall, great work. These are a lot tighter, and it matches the work you did in your MCS. A lot tighter, a lot more fluent. We see the peaks in each chapter. You're good to go, right? Now, the thing I should say about Justin's project is that it's a bit unconventional, right? This is going to be a novel, not a novel, but it's going to be 3 novellas sort of packed together in a novel-like format. So we're still working on that, right? But in terms of a 9-chapter story, you've got all your bases covered. So the next step is clean this up a little bit, make the decisions about what we talked about, and then you get to use this to guide your revisions, right? So take the draft you have now, make sure that each chapter transmits this sentence, right? Along with the other two columns, the character and the bonus. And then you're golden, right? A coherent novel, every chapter has a peak and yet leaves you wanting more. You have a character who's becoming more familiar and also has an arc. And you have a bonus that's delivered in each chapter. And then Ariel, I would strongly recommend, suggest, pray that you can use this, right? If you're that far along in the Benny book, you're probably ready to start breaking it up into chapters and doing this kind of exercise to make sure each chapter does what it needs to do. All right, any last thoughts for today? Thank you both so much for guinea pigging a little bit, and I hope this helped you. And Happy New Year.
Bardsy delivers the tools, guidance, and support you need to produce compelling novels. Our well-researched and thoroughly tested approach includes our minimum complete story, a 90-second exercise that keeps your writing on track while fueling creativity, Bardsy Publishability Index, a 23-dimension checklist that offers attainable goals and provides actionable feedback, and our brand new comprehensive character developer that helps you construct unforgettable characters. Come see for yourself at Bardsy.com today. Try our workshop or enter our first chapter contest. Then, when you're ready, Elite Membership delivers writing groups, personal coaching, and a curated community. With Bardsy, your work will captivate everyone, from agents to publishers, and, most importantly, your readers.